There is a lot of magic in the Elder Scrolls V game. Some spells are offensive, others are defensive, some can spawn in new friends, and others still can bring old ones back from the dead. But there's one spell that's seemingly worthless. Can you beat Skyrim with only the Telekinesis spell? The ride into Skyrim was fairly standard. The wagon wasn't trying to do any somersaults. Someone was granted their freedom, and I chose an Argonian as my race for the first time in recorded history. Telekinesis is an alteration spell, and Argonians start with 20 in alteration, as well as 20 in restoration, sneak, and light armor. I incorrectly assumed 2 of those would be beneficial down the line. Gave myself the worst name possible. Alduin showed up. I escaped into the keep. Not gonna say much about this part as I've gotten through this part of Skyrim without attacking anything many times. Though I did make sure to snag a bucket before leaving. It's a surprise tool that'll help us later. Outside, basking in the fresh air, I began my quest to track down the Telekinesis spell. You can't just buy it right from the beginning of the game. That would be too easy. As the saying goes, the more substantial the reward, the more bigger the risk. With the Mage Stone activated and the domicile of the spell marked on my map, I danced along the road to Riverwood. The power of the cabbage was too much for my fragile frame. I sold what I didn't need to Lucas Sims, kidnapped a few plants to take them to the big farm in the sky, and continued heading east-south, all the while casting the oak flesh spell as often as I could to raise my alteration skill a bit. There's only one location in all of Skyrim where telekinesis is guaranteed to be found: a cell in the Redwater Den, a drug den located at the tip of the Whale's Lake tail. I made sure to snag all the vomit buckets to add to my collection. A little bit of someone else's vomit in your pocket never hurt anyone. Now, predictably, getting into Redwater Den itself was of insignificance to someone as skilled at Skyrim as I am. Problem is, you must unlock an adept lock, and I only had 2 lockpicks. Of course, that problem is irrelevant when you introduce quick saves to my tool belt, but it's still an annoyance. Once that lock is picked, the drug kingpins and all other bowling pins will come to life and attack you for finding their lair. There's also another adept lock. Get the spell, use that level up you saved to restore your health, cover your body in the bark you picked off an imaginary tree, flee for your life like it depends on it, because it does, and you can finally read the book to learn you the telekinesis spell. I was pretty excited about this, having recently started a telekinesis run in BioShock. It's a real fun plasmid in BioShock. You can catch grenades in midair and shoot them back at someone. Use a Big Daddy's big dead body as a weapon. It's great. And telekinesis in Skyrim is just like that. In spirit, sort of. I'll give the Skyrim version this: it exists. That's about all it's got going for it. The initial kerfuffle was not an unexpected one. It's an adept level spell, and I'm only level 3. Of course it's going to drain the out of my magic. Upon flinging a bucket at Idaho Battle Barn, I was impressed. It did more damage than I thought it would. Using telekinesis for about 1.8 seconds damn near drained all my magic, but it seemed usable. So, the first order of business was to crank the out of my alteration spell to level up and both increase my total allotment of magic and decrease the amount needed to use telekinesis. Trust me, I know what comment you're about to leave. I'll get to it soon enough. Alteration can be power leveled relatively easily. I found a kettle, dropped it in this little brick river leading to the throat of this city's ground, picked up the kettle with my mind, waited an hour, then did it again. It only took me about 8 minutes to raise alteration by almost 20 levels, and by the end of those 8 minutes, I could hold that kettle for what felt like an eternity, at least compared to my real-world ability to pick things up with my mind. Thinking I was ready to take the fight to everyone and everything, I spoke to Jarl Balgruuf about the dragon from Helgen, cooked a series of stews and soups to have just in case of an emergency, was sent to track down the Dragonstone by Harry Potter, returned to Riverwood to play with a bucket, got attacked by a renegade group of street toughs, and used telekinesis in combat for the first time. To say that it was god-awful would be the understatement of the century. Problem 1. Managing to hit someone with the bucket in the first place. The object must be as close to you as possible before you can throw it. Otherwise, it just drops. It doesn't go very fast, and the distance you can throw it from is pathetic. Problem 2. Hitting an enemy with any object does practically nothing in the way of damage. For these hired thugs, a bucket slamming against one of their skulls takes away about 10% of their health. Keep in mind, there are at least 3 thugs attacking me at present. Problem 3. While magic does regenerate, it regenerates much slower in combat. It doesn't help that I was constantly being assaulted, forcing me to use restoration to heal myself, which in turn drained my magic even more. Long story short, I got frustrated at this idea and didn't even think about coming back to it for 3 months. I didn't touch this character in March, April, or May. This challenge was why my last actual Skyrim video was before Christmas. It put such a bad taste in my mouth that it soured me on Skyrim as a whole. Then, last week, after digging through suggestions in the Emergency Video Ideas channel in the Mitten Squad Discord server, I came back to Skyrim with a new challenge: beating Skyrim with only the Wabbajack. Now, you're probably wondering why you're watching this video instead of that one. Certainly the Wabbajack, despite its unpredictability, would be far more usable than the fucking Telekinesis spell. It most certainly was, but see, I started that playthrough in March and went back to it again almost 3 months later. Before I started that character again, I skimmed through the footage to see where I left off. What I missed was the beginning, where I did this. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure why I did that. It invalidated the entire challenge, but it doesn't matter for this video. I'm not gonna scrap that entire playthrough though, and I'm sure as shit not playing through all of Skyrim with the Wabbajack for a second time. It was sort of worth it though, because in that Wabbajack video, I began using an exploit found in Dawnstar to power level my enchanting skill. In that playthrough, it was more so to get soul gems, but in this video, I used the same tactic in an effort to get enchanting to 100. I'll run through this process once, just so you can get an understanding of what it was I was doing. Just know that it took me almost 2 hours to get enchanting up to 100. Travel to Dawnstar, turn to the left after you spawn, and you'll see a Khajiit merchant. She's an unwilling pawn in my little game. Head to the east of the town. Near the mine, you'll find a chest hidden in the ground, filled with everything that merchant has. Take what you want. In my case, it was soul gems to enchant items, enchanted items to disenchant, non-magic weapons and armor to enchant, and potions to sell. Find an enchanting table, disenchant what you can, enchant as many items as you can, go back to the merchant, quick save, hit her with a bucket, then reload that save. That will reset her inventory, so you can sell your enchanted items for easy gold. Go back to the chest, get more Go back to the chest, get more enchanting supplies, rinse and repeat until your enchanting skill is at 100. It wasn't the most fun thing to do in the world. It's boring and time consuming, but I found that after I ran through the process a couple times, I got in a groove, and I could do it all pretty mindlessly while not paying complete attention to the game. A positive side effect of using this exploit is that you will level up rather quickly. When I started the process, I was level 10, and by the time I finished, I was at level 23. As you level up, the weapons and armor you find will become higher quality and more valuable. There's one more thing I need to explain before I go any further. Skyrim uses a complex mathematical formula to calculate the total percentage of magical embodiment an enchantment applies to an overall skill of magic dispersed throughout several pieces of armor. Think logically for the first time in your life, and you'll see what I mean. But I'll walk you through it if I must. Skyrim is the Elder Scroll 5. Take the most revered algebraic invention of all time, PEMDAS, and use your hand to count to 5. What is the 5th letter in PEMDAS? A. A stands for addition. Addition is when you use addition to numbers together. What all this means is that enchantments stack. A necklace and a helmet that both reduce the magic cost of an alteration spell by 25% will give you a total reduction of 50% thanks to the power of addition. The goal is to get that 50% up to 100%, and that's exactly what I did. After so much time and effort put into this living nightmare of an idea, I can now cast alteration skills until the end of time. To test that and to get alteration up to 100 just because I can, I sat there using telekinesis on a potion bottle for 10 straight minutes. The worst spell in the game is now overpowered to the point of being broken beyond mortal comprehension. My armor ensured any damage taken would be minimal, and I set off for Bleak Falls Barrow to obtain the Dragonstone. Only one of those 3 statements was the truth. As awesome as it was to finally figure out how to abuse exploits in Skyrim like everyone else did 8 years ago, Telekinesis is still the most revolting spell to use in all of Skyrim because it's not meant to be an offensive spell. It's not defensive either. It's just there. It's a f***ing gimmick. The only worthwhile benefit of having this spell equipped is that you can see the name of an item from an obscene distance. If you were role-playing as a thief, the infinite usage of telekinesis with that name thing would be fun, but it doesn't help me in any way. You're still attacking enemies with items you gently toss at them. You can't even catch arrows out of the air as they're being shot at you. Weak, regular bandits, like those camping out inside Bleak Falls Barrow, are manageable, but because I'm like level 24 now, those kinds of enemies are few and far between. It took me 5 minutes to get this bandit plunderer's health halfway down. Yet another way this spell drives you towards alcoholism is more a fault of how most enemies attack, rather than the spell itself. They charge at you with a melee weapon, getting right in your f***ing face. Do you know how f***ing hard it is to pick up a steel ingot from across the room and bring it close enough to you that you can fire it like a projectile while you're being harassed by an old man with a sword and a flaming stick? No, of course you don't, but I do. Trying to attack literally anything with telekinesis is infuriating in every possible sense of the word. When it comes to combat, there are no redeeming qualities to this run. Nothing about it is fun or enjoyable, which was why, after all the pain I'd put myself through to be able to cast Alteration spells until all possible events in the known universe transpired an infinite number of times, I decided to ignore pretty much every enemy I could. I wouldn't attack something unless I absolutely had to. This method of attack is just too cumbersome and convoluted to do on anything but the weakest of foes. Despite that, I chose to fight the Draugr Scourge Lord to death with my mind, rather than just leading it to one of those traps that would kill it instantly. Another part of this, because the suffering just keeps going, is that sometimes the object you send flying towards your attacker will just bounce in the complete wrong direction and land somewhere where you'll never see it again. From what I could tell, an item either does damage or it doesn't. An iron arrow you pick up off the ground won't do anything, while a potion or a sword or a shield will. Bigger objects are generally better, things like warhammers or greatswords. It's far more likely that some part of it will hit whatever you're shooting at, and they're easier to spot on the ground. With the Draugr Lord beaten into submission, I returned to Whiterun to give the stone to Farengar, experimented with the range of telekinesis, and went out to the watchtower to fight a dragon for the first time. There are a bunch of guards attacking with you, as well as Eorlith and the wizard. The dragon can die if you do nothing. I know that for a fact, because I lived it. At one point I threw a bowl at it menacingly. That was the extent of my contribution to the fight. The Greybeards welcomed me into their tribe. I loudly mouth-blasted the souls they ripped from the nether, sprinted through their gate, and rode a cart to Solitude so I could enter Ustengrav to retrieve the horn of Jordan Nottingham. On the way there, I killed the guy with a bucket. That was a very gamer move on my part. I also tried to kill some magic man with a bread once I was inside. It didn't work out very well, so I pretty much just absorbed all the punishment the undead creatures sent my way, while I used a restoration spell to heal myself almost every second of the way. I made sure to get the Become Ethylbenzene shout before I used hand powers to draw the mysterious note to my grasp, flung it into the water, escaped, spoke to Donald Dean in her special basement, returned the recorder to the Greybeards. They rudely began their indoctrination procedures without letting me hold a bucket for moral support and without stripping me naked first. To make them pay for their crimes against humanity, even though I'm not a human so that's not it, I bopped one of them with a bucket a couple times. I've never been more savagely beaten in my entire life, and that's including what I've done to myself. Nearly breaking both hands on cement in my parents' garage because they were out of Gatorade and I was drunk enough to barely remember what I was doing was mere child's play compared to what the Greybeards did to me. I didn't even have a chance to fight back. They just kept blowing and blowing me into a wall until my little lizard heart couldn't take it anymore and I froze to death. From there I fought the dragon at Kynes Grove with Delphine, which, oddly enough, wasn't that bad. Honestly, it made me feel more powerful in Skyrim than I had in a long time, bouncing a two-handed war axe off a dragon, catching it out of the air, and throwing it back at him again without it ever touching the ground is something most people have never experienced in Skyrim. It also doesn't hurt that the dragon was a massive target and was somewhat distracted by Delphine's attacks. After the death of the dragon, it was only fitting that I got my ass kicked in the Thalmor embassy. Oh, well, before that, I beat a courier to death with a cabbage. Trust me, that's important and will come into play later. Every complication I've talked about so far was in effect in the embassy. The Thalmor are tough as nails, are constantly up in your shit, attacking you with their little daggers, while others sit back with their magic and drain your own pool of magic. And because I tried just running past them, I had to contend with like 6 of them at once, down in the torture chamber. Foolishly, or as a result of me getting caught up in my own ego again, I didn't bring any potions into the embassy with me, despite having an effectively infinite pool of potions to draw from, thanks to that exploit in Dawnstar. A lesser Mitten squad might have given up, but I never did. If I couldn't beat them all to death at the same time, I would tip the odds in my favor by doing laps around their building to confuse them just before I... Fuck K88518, go f yourself. I would tip the odds in my favor by doing laps around their building to confuse them just before I entered the building to fight the one Thalmor who was inside guarding the sweet rolls. It was still no picnic, but it was, at the very least, doable. With the whereabouts of Esbern now known by everyone who has half a dozen buckets in their back pocket, I traveled to Riften, entered the Ratway, ignored all the bullies whose home I had just invaded, found Esbern, and we began our escape. The Thalmor weren't finished with me yet, and were more than a match for Esbern, which was unfortunate, as I was counting on him to sweep me off my claws and carry me to safety. Good news is, because Esbern is a follower at this point, entering a new area causes him to spawn behind you. So as long as you can survive the Thalmor onslaught, you can just ignore them. The next important task was making these potion bottles do f***ing sweet tricks. That was a real nostalgia trip for me. Back in the day, back in my prime, I could make my tech deck do flips too if I used both hands. Then we had to get to Alduin's wall. Not a whole lot worth mentioning. Delphine and Ronaldo followed me a good chunk of the way there. Did most of the work inside, while I preoccupied myself with stealing their kettles, solving puzzles, and slicing my hand open. The Greybeards forcefully inserted knowledge of their king into my head hole. I braved the mountain wilderness, tried in vain to rescue an old friend from a life stuck on a rock. Failed at that pretty miserably. Met Parthenax, had to fail the challenge to make him hot. He told me about an Elder Scroll, and I rode to Winterhold to find someone who knew about the scroll. I didn't bother meeting Fiona's husband inside the College of Winterhold. I went straight for the inverted igloo, hiding out among the seals. Got the location of the scroll from this barely sentient pair of shoes, and entered Alfland to retrieve the scroll. The metal spiders and wheelie boys got in the way towards the end. The ethanol shout let me survive the massive fall. I tried petting the weird-looking dog down in Blackreach. It responded by shooting a chorus of acidic saliva at my face, thinking it was possible to make me any uglier than I am now. For the first time ever, I didn't even have to look up a guide on how to solve the puzzle guarding the Elder Scroll. I'm sure the fact that I just did it not even 24 hours earlier had nothing to do with it. With the scroll safely sealed in my private transportation quarters, I returned to the top of the world, read the scroll at the window in time, learned the Dragonrun shout. I dropped a few buckets in preparation for what was about to transpire, and for the first time, I could battle Alduin with buckets. I suppose it shouldn't have come as a shock to me that the real deal heavy-duty extra tall lots of girth buckets did big damage against him, but every victory comes at a cost. In my case, my most prized bucket flew off the mountain, destined to be out of reach forever. I like to think it knew it helped me through my struggle, and it moved on to help someone else. With Alduin sent back to the Shadow Realm, I persuaded the leaders of the free world to come to a peace treaty at High Hrothgar to discuss the end of the world like civilized folk. It dragged on, and on, and on, and on, and guess what? On. Esbern taught me the word needed to call the dragon. I used the power of seduction to lure a distant cousin into the trap. He flied me to Skuldafn, and more nothing began. Just like other dungeons, the Draugr combat encounters inside the temple are merely a suggestion. You don't have to fight them. However, the Draugr White Lord does have to die before you can press deeper into the tunnel. Time consuming to be sure, because of how little damage anything does, and it required far more effort than using a fork or a torch, but thanks to the restoration spell swirling around in my left hand, it wasn't an impossible task. I didn't try to fight Nokrin, only because I got my ass kicked when I tried to take him on with the Wabbajack. In Sovngarde, I persuaded Soon and had to best him in combat before being granted access to the Hall of Monitors. If I didn't say it yet, I've been playing a novice for reasons that should be obvious. I point that out because this monster of a man completely destroyed me in under 10 seconds. He, without a doubt, posed a more significant threat than Alduin or any of the Draugr lords I'd faced up to that point. 3 attacks from him were all it took to kill me, but I did get to feel like Captain America when I ricocheted a shield off his skull and caught it in midair with my special hand. I did win in the end, but he was by no means an easy person to beat. Thankfully, you don't have to kill him. The fight ends when his health is at around 50%. With my permission slip signed, I entered the Hall of Heroes. The 4 of us ran to the outside. I dropped a few buckets, we cleared the skies, and Alduin arrived for the final battle. Would it surprise you to know that this was a f***ing joke? After everything I've done, it shouldn't. That's how these challenges always tend to go. On their own, my buckets did a fair amount of damage, all things considered, but the big buckets pushed him with an incomprehensible force that caused unbelievable damage to the beast. The World Eater was slain in perhaps the most anticlimactic battle of all time. I sent one of my buckets on a journey, I was sent back to Skyrim, and I beat Skyrim with only the Telekinesis spell. If you enjoyed the video or learned anything, leave a like. Leave a dislike if you didn't enjoy the video or didn't learn anything. Thanks to the Champion tier supporters as well as other channel members for making videos like this one possible. Join the Mitten Squad Discord server through a link in the video description. Follow me on Twitter @Mitten Squad. My name is Paul of Mitten Squad. Have a wonderful day.